Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted and privileged to welcome a very senior and accomplished professional and a fellow author from the US, Mr. Paul N. Larsen. Paul, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Ashutosh. It's wonderful to be here. Just with that eloquent introduction, I'm wondering, who is he talking about? That's a little bit of my imposter syndrome coming in, but thank you so much for that lovely intro and this opportunity.
Thank you. Paul is a mindset coach. He's an author and he's an educator. He's also an author of a book titled Find Your Voice as a Leader. And all of you know I'm very partial to authors. So, Paul, let's start with your book.
Sure.
Tell me about your book.
Well, as they say, many authors say a book is a labor of love. I would say that mine was a labor. I'm not sure if it was of love yet.
Mm-hmm.
It came over time. And it came over time because as a leader myself in the business world, but more importantly in life, I found that many times leaders, their voices were muted.
Mm-hmm.
Their voices, they didn't stand alone. They didn't stand for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually didn't even find their unique voice.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of my clients as a coach that said to me in one of our sessions, Paul, you help us find our voice as a leader. You are continually giving us opportunities to develop that voice, that unique brand, that unique perspective of how we inspire ourselves and others. You are the find your voice guy. And it's exactly what he said. And it's one of those gifts you get when you put yourself out there.
Yep.
And I said to myself, well, I guess I'm the find your voice guy. And before I know that, it took off and I created a coaching methodology using the acronym of the word voice, VOICE.
And what does it stand for?
Yes, absolutely. So it's about discovering what's important to you, your values.
Yeah.
What makes you tick.
Yeah.
It's establishing and creating your outcomes, i.e. your vision. Where are you going and how are you going to get there? It's demonstrating your influence. So how do you exercise that influence with yourself and with others? It's not all about the org chart and who reports to who and how many people do I have in my enterprise or in my team. It's really about how do you engage and enroll people? How do you lead people who don't necessarily even report to you in life or at an organization? Then it's about stepping out of our lovely CZ, I call it, the comfort zone, which is revealing your courage. And I wholeheartedly believe everyone has courage. It's about revealing it and using it. And then lastly, the E, that stands for, putting it all together and crafting your expression, your brand, your legacy. There's nothing more sad for me when I go into an organization and somebody's been working there in a leadership role for many years. And I ask them, what do they stand for? What's their legacy? What impact do they have on the organization? And they look at me and they think, and they say to me, Paul, I've never thought about that before. I've never actually even thought that. I hope it's this, or I hope it's that. So I want people to be really deliberate and crafting that brand as a leader of how you impact the world.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you.
Sure.
You also talk about 5 critical steps to start building one's legacy as a leader. What are these steps?
Well, the steps are actually finding, again, the values, your outcomes, your influence, your courage, and expression.
Okay.
And then I add a couple of more in there though, and I call it the 3 A's actually, as it pertains to sort of coaching. And the beautiful part about being a coach is I coach my life. I coach what has happened to me in my life, in my younger years, my way younger years, my business experience, my business leadership, and then everything I've done as an entrepreneur. And I look at my successes and failures, and I can encapsulate it with the self-awareness that I've been able to have. So bringing that self-awareness of who you are, your vulnerabilities, your motivations, all the things that make you who you are, that self-awareness is the first A. Secondly, it's self-advocacy. It's being an advocate for yourself. You know, there's a lot of people out there who love to support others. And we call them sometimes people pleasers, which is wonderful. But you know what? If you're not an advocate for yourself, your self-love, your self-compassion, all the enrichment that you need, you're not going to be able to serve others. So it's self-awareness, first A, self-advocacy, second A, and that last A is finally taking that action. So it's awareness, advocacy, and action. We can have all the awareness we want. In fact, there's a lot of people who are really aware, and then they never get out of their head. They never take that step of action to create that vision that they have, to reveal their courage, to create that brand, which is what's so important about what you do in terms of the brand called you. Everyone has a brand, but how do people reveal that and are aware of it? And, you know, you and I both know, and all of us know to some degree, if you don't author your brand, your legacy, it's being authored by someone else, because everyone has that brand.
Correct. Well said. Well said. So, Paul, let's move on now. And, you know, you've had a very, very fascinating life. Let me start by asking you, and you spoke about it when I introduced you, about the imposter syndrome. How have you thrived with imposter syndrome?
Great question. Beautiful question. You know, I think I've had imposter syndrome my whole life. And it was probably in the early part of this century where I was in a role as a chief human resource officer. I did not necessarily have that trajectory in terms of my career. It was just some steps I took, and oh wow, okay, this is a wonderful opportunity. The company it was through some mergers and acquisitions, it became a $3 billion enterprise. But I felt like a fake. I felt like a fraud. I felt like I don't really know if I really know what I'm doing. And, you know, I don't know if I really belong here. I'd go to these big board meetings back in New York, Wall Street, the whole bit. And I'm like, I wonder if they know that I really don't know what I'm doing. And I got to tell you, these thoughts were very real, even though I could stand up on stage and give a town hall. I could go to a board meeting and report out on all the human capital data. And it wasn't until one of my mentors said to me, she looked me square in the eye and she said, do you feel like a fake or fraud? And it was almost like, Ashutosh, it was almost like the burden had been lifted off of me. Like, wow. Yes, I said. And she goes, oh yeah. She says, you know, she says, oh yeah, you just have imposter syndrome. And I said, excuse me, what? Excuse me, there's a name for this. So imposter syndrome is, what it really is feeling like you have to be somebody else to be successful in the role you're in. Parent, student, leader, manager, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife. It could be any kind of role that you don't feel you're adequately prepared for, and you think you're going to be found out as a fake or fraud. So it's not about just having more confidence. It's actually thinking you need to be somebody else. That's what imposter syndrome is.
Amazing. Amazing. And again, when I was reading about you, you also at some stage of your life hit rock bottom. What did you learn from that lowest of low phases that you must have gone through?
Yeah, you know, I love the way you said that too. When we hit rock bottom, and I like to think of it as just kind of a rocky beach, right? You know, and we can have the sand and some rocks and the waves that kind of crash over us. It's never a bottom, you know, unless you're looking up and really thinking that you can't get up. And so, yes, I had some things in my life where I've gone through, like a lot of folks, the losses of my life, the losses of my parents and my sister. But I think one of the aspects was something that I had created for myself, which was a dependency on alcohol, a dependency to use alcohol as not just to have a nice time or enjoy a nice glass of wine as a connoisseur, but to use it to mask certain things.
Yep.
And to use it to mask feelings.
Mm.
And so when I went through sort of my own voice, my own voice process, and I thought, if I really want to have a life
Yeah.
that's worth living for me,
Yeah.
alcohol cannot play a role in that.
Mm.
And I determined at that point, that was about 30 years ago, and I determined at that point to set my boundaries so that alcohol would not be part of my world, and to give that up. And so as we say sort of in the community, that's when I got sober. You know, I like to think I was certainly had sobriety and clarity before that, but by getting that out of me, it's provided me the self-awareness, the advocacy, and the action, and the clarity of vision that I needed. So absolutely. So my, short answer there, actually probably a long answer, but short answer is, if that's the bottom, I can deal with anything.
Incredible. Thank you. Great response. And then moving on, when and how did you find your true voice of inspiration?
Yeah, I love we all have moments if we allow ourselves these moments, right? If we just allow ourselves, and so much of today's world is so instantaneous. It's posting and liking and TikToking and snapping and all the things we do in our digital environment. And it was a few years ago, and it took just a quiet day for me in a church, and it was at my father's memorial service. So a time when we weren't on our phones, we weren't looking at the latest Facebook or Insta picture. And I was reflecting on my father's life. He had had a wonderful, wonderful life. And he had been an airline pilot for many, many years. And I was listening to people talk about what a wonderful, wonderful man he was and what he meant to others, i.e. his legacy. And I knew that, of course, because he was an incredible, incredible human. But I sat there in the kind of that quiet reflective on a hard pew that churches tend to have.
Yeah.
And it just hit me. It just hit me. What will they say about me? If this was me 20, 30, 40, 50 years in the future, let's hope 50, right? Let's go forward. If this was my service, what will they be saying about me? Will I be able to have the standards and expectations that my father exuded with all the people here? And people were coming back from 20, 30, 40 years ago when he was their neighbors and all sorts of things, besides all the flight crews that were his colleagues. And I tell you, I sat there and I couldn't answer that honestly in the affirmative. And I said, I have more to give. I have more to serve. I don't know what that is, but I have to find out. And so it wasn't just, find your passion and go out and do it, because we have to eat too, and we have to pay our bills.
Correct.
But it was really taking a step back and just listening to myself and say, okay, this was a wonderful lesson from my father, which is exactly what it was and what it is. And going out then and then determining how am I supposed to serve? I didn't have the answer. I just kind of put it out into the universe. And I was very aware of receiving the messages that came back. And so today, 2022, I find myself in the role as a coach, mindset coach, to help others in terms of centering and grounding themselves as well.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. In fact, writing one's obituary is probably one of the most difficult things in life. And that's a great exercise I have done. But moving on now, Paul, what would you say is your leadership superpower?
Listening.
Okay.
So in today's world, we don't do enough listening to understand. We listen to reply. And that's taken from the late Stephen Covey, who talks about, in the fast-paced environment, of which now it's even faster. We are not listening to each other. We are not recognizing each other. We are not acknowledging each other. We don't have to
Mm.
agree with each other, but we just have to accept each other to listen. And what happens is we don't accept each other, I don't think, many times. And so we are defensive with our listening. So as a coach, what it's taught me is first to listen to myself and to listen to myself to understand and not just to reply, to sit with myself and really figure things out for my own life. And then to use those skills as a superpower with others. And I did that as a leader. I would do that with so many of the folks that I worked with, and just sit and listen. And many times the responses, it wasn't that I needed a response. It was like, wow, you're actually taking the time to just listen to me. I didn't have to have an opinion.
Correct.
It's just to listen and acknowledge.
Well said. And your response gives me the segue to my next set of questions, which is you as a coach. So let me start by asking you that for someone who was, in the leadership of a $3 billion company, traveling all over the world, and when you suddenly realized your own imposter syndrome and so on and so forth, what made you move from a lucrative corporate career to becoming a coach?
Yeah. So beautiful question. I was at a beautiful company at that time, Adobe Technology, which is known for many things. Wonderful organization with incredible colleagues and teammates. But I wasn't engaged with what I was doing. I didn't have that spark. I didn't have that inspiration. Had nothing to do with the company or the people or the culture. It really was truly a great place. So that told me right there. It would have been so easy to say, oh, it's because of this culture or this manager. That's why I'm feeling this way. It was absolutely something inside of me that needed to awaken even more. And I said to myself, okay, it's not about going to another company. It's about doing something else in life. And what is it that I'm supposed to do? So I put the question out there. And I went out and I went out and I left Adobe after planning that out a little bit for just making sure all my tiers were all in place, and found out that it wasn't necessarily consulting. It was much more around coaching and working with one-on-one, working with groups and teams to help them do the same thing that I had done in my life. So it wasn't necessarily going out and coaching on something I did not have experience with. It was all around the coaching of what I've had experience and have experience on. Amazing. And that's what brings me alive. And that's where I have a true partnership with my clients.
Fantastic. And you are a mindset coach. How do you define what you do?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Is we all are told, have your elevator speak, have your elevator. What do you do? What do you do? Well, I help people sort of break free from the fear of a fixed mindset so that they can expand and live in the vibrancy of a growth mindset. So I look for folks. I partner with individuals. I partner with organizations or teams that truly want to move from that fixed and fear over into and nest in the growth and the colorfulness and the expansiveness, of the growth mindset. Now, key word there is coachability.
Correct.
Is that people, how coachable are you? Is one of the questions I always ask a prospective client. How coachable are you, and how do you know? Because that brings in what I talked about. The first A is self-awareness. I can't provide self-awareness to somebody. I can provide thought partnership. I can provide some accountability. I can provide a container for people to try on different behaviors or different thought patterns, but I can't provide that awareness. That has to come from inside. So that it's always about that willingness to try something new. It's the blending of the art and science together, which I love. So the clients that come to me and say, I need a coach because I'm told I have to have a coach. Will you be my coach? Those are not going to be probably my best partnerships or potential.
Well said. I agree with you. My next question is that, given your incredible background, in so many different areas that you have done, very similar to the painting behind you. Life is full of so many different colors.
Mhm.
How has your background supported you in your coaching, your style, and your values?
Yeah, beautiful question. Thank you for that. And yes, with the painting in the background, the vibrancy, the colorfulness, the imagery that comes around, and it can be very selective and it's very personal to whoever sees it, right? But that's what a coach can do as well, and that's what's prepared me. I look at my life and I look at the transparency that's been given to me in my life, my successes, my failures. I don't look at them as especially failures. I don't look at those as, oh, how bad. I look at those as lessons learned. I look at those as that's made me a much more humanistic individual, or that has given me a sense of a worldview that I did not have before. So I look at all of that, and that's what I coach. So it's the vulnerability. It's that ability to be with somebody and understand all the different things, the empathy. So it's my life and everything in it may not always reflect or be a partner with somebody else, but for so many people, it's looking at a life. Do you want to live an inspired life, or do you want to live a life that is forced? And I lived a life that was forced in terms of going in and doing things day in and day out. And I said, stop. I want to pivot this. I want to finesse this. I want a different outcome for me in my life. So just that whole experience that you mentioned, besides all the things that happen to us in our life, that's what I coach. And of course, the universe answers, just like a painting will answer us when we look at it with its own message.
Wonderful.
The universe answers, and here are your clients. And as they go through all these different journeys, I can partner with them on those journeys.
Terrific. Paul, my last question to you, and this is for the many, many people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your amazing journey, your incredible experience, what would you say are 3 lessons you would want our viewers and listeners to take away from your journey and from our conversation?
Yeah, it's I love the question, and I'm going to bring in just a quick little synopsis to that. I think it's really important for anybody to understand who they are. And so the 3 things that I do continually with myself and the 3 lessons I bring in with my clients is first, name it. Name what is going on with you in your role, perhaps as a student, in your role as a leader, in your role as a partner. But name it. We don't do enough of that. We tend to avoid things. We avoid conflict. We avoid awkward feelings. Like I mentioned earlier, I ran away from things by using alcohol to mask things. So first, name it. And there's so many ways in which to go through that sort of self-awareness, but name it. After you name it, then you want to use it. You want to tame it. So I love this, and you can probably call me now the coach of rhymes, right? Whatever. But you name it, and then you tame it. So like with imposter syndrome, people feel bad about it. I got to overcome it. I have to get over it. And I'm like, you know what? Life is too much work already. Don't add more work and friction to your life. Name it. Learn to tame it. In other words, just like a wild horse, or like this painting behind me, all the wildness, tame it. And then lastly, don't shame it. So it's name it, tame it, and don't shame it. Whatever that may be. For me, it was all the things that come into my life, like imposter syndrome, learning to name it and acknowledge it, learning to use it for good. Because when my imposter voice speaks up, I know that I'm living in my growth mindset. I know that I'm trying something new. My imposter voice is trying to drag me back to the fear mindset. I'm like, oh no, this is great. I'm doing something new here. But I don't shame it. I don't make it, I don't call it out as being negative or bad. And I don't shame it, because when you shame something within yourself, obviously you're shaming yourself. And I think when I look at organizations and I look at all the work organizations do, there's a lot of times where they don't do it on purpose sometimes, but through engagement surveys, through feedback, through performance reviews, they have a way of shaming without taming and naming it first.
Amazing.
And I think there's just a way we don't need to shame everything, especially with our own self.
Amazing, amazing. What an amazing conversation. Paul, on that note, and your 3 wonderful lessons, name it, tame it, and don't shame it. Thank you so much for talking to me. Thank you for talking to me about your book, Find Your Voice as a Leader. I'm asking all my viewers and listeners to go and check out the book on Amazon and then take a call. I will certainly go and check out your book. Thank you also for sharing with me that voice is actually an acronym. Thank you for talking to me about your 3 A's, which are awareness, advocacy, and action. And thank you also for sharing with me some of your incredibly deep thoughts on how you handled your rock bottom imposter syndrome and then coaching. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. It's been such an incredible honor. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart to yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.